What a mighty civilization! Just look at that icon of the ancient world. Its art and architecture are simply mind-blowing, and its culture and daily life influenced how people have lived for thousands of years. Wait, you're thinking about the Roman Empire again? Well, no, I'm actually talking about ancient Greece. There's a belief that the Romans had admired ancient Greece so much that they stole a lot of fundamental things from them, like their culture, architecture, and even their gods. Some people think that even the concept of the Roman Colosseum was stolen from Greek blueprints. But is that really accurate? Well, you'll have to watch this video until the end to find out the entire truth. And if you like videos about ancient history, don't hesitate to subscribe to this channel so that you never miss out on new videos in the future. Now make yourself comfortable and let's get started. So, how did the Romans come to admire Greek culture so much that they decided to adopt it? Well, let's go back in time, when the Roman Empire wasn't even called that yet. It was still the Roman Republic. But don't worry, we don't need to get into the differences in this video. At that time, Rome wasn't the mighty empire we often think of today. It was still growing in both power and influence. It all begins with Rome's expansion in the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC. During this period, Rome was involved in a series of conflicts and wars, as they often were, and as Rome emerged victorious, it began to assert its dominance in the Mediterranean region. By the mid-2nd century BC, Rome had successfully conquered significant Greek territories, which included Macedonia and Greece itself. This conquest revealed to the Romans the rich and complex culture of the Greeks. The Greeks, on the other hand, were seen as the epitome of cultural refinement, with their advanced art, literature, philosophy, and architecture. The Romans, realizing the value of these cultural achievements, decided to borrow a couple of things. But now let's get to particular examples. Did you know that a lot of Roman sculptures were actually copies of Greek originals? That's right, the Romans admired Greek art so much that they replicated many famous works to decorate their homes and public spaces. But they didn't just copy, of course. They mostly made slight modifications in order to suit their tastes. For example, while Greek sculptures typically idealized human forms and mythological themes, Roman versions would sometimes include more realistic features and portraits of real people, especially their emperors. So yeah, if a sculpture had abs bigger than its head, well, you're probably looking at a Greek sculpture. But still, most of the Roman sculptures were actually replicated from the Greek. But enough about sculptures, let's talk about something else the Romans borrowed from the Greeks. Take Roman roads, for example. The saying "all roads lead to Rome" exists for a reason. The Romans had built an extensive network of roads that spanned their huge empire and connected cities while facilitating trade, military movements, and communication. But it wasn't like one emperor had woke up one day and came up with the idea of building road networks. Honestly, the idea was not entirely new. Because yeah, the Greeks had their own sophisticated road networks before the Romans. However, the Romans had taken these concepts and expanded them on an unprecedented scale. They used the Greeks' techniques and added their innovations, like multi-layered roadbeds for durability. The same goes for their aqueducts. The Greeks had developed early aqueducts and water supply systems that were quite impressive for the time, and they were typically open channels or stone-lined trenches which relied on gravity to transport the water from springs to their cities. But the Romans constructed monumental aqueducts to transport fresh water from distant sources to their cities, ensuring a reliable water supply. The Pont du Gard in France is a prime example of how the Romans enhanced Greek engineering techniques, and they didn't just stop at transporting water. They also created complex sewer systems, ensuring their cities remained clean and sanitary, something the Greeks had not quite mastered. Even the layout of Roman cities reflected the Greek influence. The concept of the forum, a central public space, was taken from the Greek agora. The Romans had adapted it to their needs, turning it into a political, commercial, and social center. And the grid layout of many Roman cities also had its roots in Greek urban planning principles. So, while all of these ideas weren't entirely new, we can only praise the Romans for the way in which they improved them. Now let's talk about the Roman Pantheon. Its design was actually inspired by Greek temples, which were all about symmetry and harmony, but the Romans took these concepts and then elevated them with their innovative use of concrete. And this wasn't just any old concrete. The Romans developed a special type of hydraulic concrete that could set underwater, making their buildings incredibly durable. The Pantheon's dome is still the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world, which is pretty mind-blowing when you consider it was built almost 2,000 years ago. And here's a fun fact: the Pantheon has been in continuous use since it was completed around 126 AD. Originally built as a temple to all the Roman gods, it was later converted into a Christian church, which helped to preserve it through the centuries. And today, it's one of the best preserved ancient Roman buildings. And if you're in Rome, it is undoubtedly a must-see attraction. But what about the famous Colosseum? While it's definitely a Roman creation, its design was also stolen from Greek amphitheaters. The Greeks, well, they love their theaters, and the Romans saw this and thought, why not take it up a notch? They borrowed the basic concept and introduced a cool new element: those grand and iconic arches, which made it possible for the Colosseum to hold tens of thousands of spectators. And speaking of amphitheaters, the Colosseum wasn't only for gladiator battles. The Romans expanded on the Greek idea by hosting a variety of events, including mock sea battles, and it's all thanks to its sophisticated system of water channels. Can you even imagine watching a naval battle in the middle of Rome? The Greeks had great theaters, but the Romans took the idea and made it even more spectacular. But now let's talk about literature and philosophy. You've probably heard the words Aeneid, Iliad, or Odyssey. The Romans were big fans of Greek culture, and you can see this in their writings and their philosophical ideas. For example, the Aeneid, a great piece of Roman literature, was heavily influenced by Greek epics. Virgil, who wrote it, basically looked at Homer's Iliad and Odyssey and tailored his work to celebrate Rome's origins and destiny. All in all, today it would be called plagiarism. Then there's the philosopher Seneca, who was really into Greek Stoicism but added his own Roman twist. Instead of just talking about abstract ideas, he focused on practical ethics and the art of living well, which really resonated with Roman citizens. And by the way, Cicero, the great Roman orator, well, he often integrated Greek rhetorical techniques into his speeches. He blended them with Roman legal principles to create powerful orations that swayed the Senate. And it's as though he took the best of both worlds just to make his own arguments even more compelling. And you know what else the Romans stole from the Greek world? Their gods. Yes, the Romans basically took Greek gods and myths, gave them brand new names, and then just made them their own. For example, the Greek god Zeus became Jupiter in Roman mythology, and the Romans would probably insist that Jupiter was their own and not Zeus, but let me take a moment to describe these two different gods. The Greek Zeus was the king of the gods, and the Roman Jupiter was also king of the gods. Zeus ruled over the sky and thunder, and Jupiter, well, also ruled over the sky and thunder. Zeus wielded a thunderbolt, and surprise, Jupiter also wielded a thunderbolt. And both had the highest authority among the gods, and even their symbols, like the eagle and the oak tree, were both the same. So it's pretty clear that Jupiter is just a rebranded Zeus. The Greeks also had Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, and the Romans adopted her too, renaming her Venus. And just like Aphrodite, Venus was associated with love and beauty and fertility, and both of the goddesses were depicted as stunningly beautiful, often involved in romantic and passionate myths. The list goes on and on. Hermes, who used to be the Greek god before becoming a luxury bag, was also known as Mercury in Roman mythology. The god of the sea, Poseidon, rebranded as Neptune, as well as the god of the underworld, Hades, being repackaged into Pluto. The Romans essentially swapped out the names, but kept the roles and the characteristics largely the same. But of course, they didn't just copy these gods and hope that no one would notice. Oh no, they integrated them into their own religious practices and festivals. To make sure that everyone bought into their vision of the gods, the Romans built grand temples and held elaborate ceremonies that were dedicated to the deities. The Romans also used their military and political power to spread their religion. As they were expanding their empire, they built temples to Roman gods in newly conquered lands while encouraging local populations to worship the gods alongside their own. By doing so, they effectively rebranded the Greek gods as their own and ensured that the world saw them as distinctly Roman. And now we'll be talking about the very basic things that the Romans stole from the Greeks and used as part of their everyday life. But before we continue, be sure that you're subscribed to the channel because we publish a new video every week and you definitely don't want to miss anything. If you're enjoying this video and finding something new, well, don't forget to hit the like button because it really helps the video get more views. And with that, we can move on to the final part. Now let's talk about the Greek slaves. Did you know that they served as tutors for Roman children? This led to the widespread adoption of the Greek educational program in Rome. And the Romans, well, they ended up studying Greek rhetoric and philosophy. And we can easily say that Greek wisdom actually shaped the minds of future Roman leaders and even their emperors. Oh, and let's not forget about Roman cuisine. Greek chefs and slaves introduced exotic dishes, herbs, and cooking techniques to Roman kitchens. To understand just how deeply the Greek world influenced the Romans, let me show you another mind-blowing detail. You're looking at the iconic Roman toga. You've probably seen this in pretty much every movie about the Roman Empire because the toga was actually a symbol of Roman citizenship. And here's the Greek Haematian. Now compare them, and don't they look the same? As you might have already guessed, it's not because they had the same fashion designer, but because the Romans had seen the Greek style and then adapted it to their tastes, making it a central part of their own identity. Now let's count all the things that they borrowed from the Greeks. Sculptures, the idea of road networks and aqueducts, architectural features, literature, gods of course, clothing, food, and education. The Greek influence on Roman society was profound and far-reaching. However, you do have to agree that every aspect we've touched on, the Romans adapted and perhaps made even better. But what do you think about all of this? Be sure to tell me in the comments down below if I missed anything. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.